options, so fans can walk up and fill up their little water bottles and, have some nice little free automotive-generated hydration.
Well, I should say, on display at the launch of this program at Spa, and it unfortunately came very close to a point where I had to rush off to do TV, so I handily got to all the presentation in French and none of it in English. But there was a very attractive bottled water line, which implies that it is, of course, the only product that's coming from the car. I don't think anybody's sitting there Dasani-like and taking it from the exhaust pipe, but it's a thought, isn't it? I mean, the theory is that it should be pure enough to drink.
Should. I guess that's
not sure I'm going to go.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why we don't see, press conferences announcing Pennzoil with little champagne glasses filled with their finest 40 weight. But this one, how's this? A mechanic friend that I used to work with on a little Sports 2000 race team, he was famous for applying racing-related lubricants to things he would eat just to show us how strong the human body is, including putting Loctite on a slice of pizza and eating it. So I think I know who we should go to, at least to use as the human test dummy for drinking whatever comes out the back of this hydrogen prototype. And if he survives, maybe we can get others in on the game too.
It does take a little further than I'd be comfortable with, the likes of Joe Bradley testing whatever he's found pooled on a paddock floor to see whether or not what's leaking. And he has done that many times live. But is it brake fluid? Is it whatever? And I think only been hospitalised 4 or 5 times, which is quite impressive. But all good. So yeah, I mean, it's coming. Hydrogen. When you speak to the really, really, really smart people, and I try to, and I don't just mean in motorsport, by the way, I mean across the automotive industry, hydrogen and fuel cell technology is certainly the tech that most of the really deep kind of blue sky thinkers would say has got the most prospect in the future. And the big thing that holds it back, of course, is infrastructure. So if that can be solved for the motorsport side of things and the safety aspects can be solved, I'd love to see what's going to be possible from new technology. I think it's fascinating. Of course, there are some downsides in terms of the soundtrack to some of our motorsport being very different in the future. But I think we've got to stay relevant. I'm not a fan of gimmick. I'm a major fan of technology demonstration. And let's wait and see if some of the really big brains that we have around motorsport MP can come and blow us away once again.
I also think this might have birthed a new off-season, I don't know if it's a game show. It might just be a featured segment on the Weekend Sports Cars presented by Cooper Tires. But I definitely think we need to engage drivers, mechanics, and fans and listeners to respond with their answers to what exactly would you drink that comes out the back of a race car? And there could be a variety of answers, who knows? But everyone will have different limits. Some people will say absolutely nothing. Then we will probably find some gems, some human beings that might warrant some regular monitoring by mental health officials. And they might tell us, look, whether it's pureeing rubber or oil or whatever, count me in. Bring me a fine pint glass filled with whatever I'm down. So
it's not that far removed from actually enjoying the smell of a race car, is it?
Well, and I forget who the first comedian was to roll this one out. I do recall laughing hysterically and never forgetting it afterwards. But the premise, which isn't too far, was a comedian saying the bravest person in the world was the first man, and I guess he assumed it was a man, was the first man to look up, see a cow on top of a hill, and say, "You see that thing hanging below the cow? I'm going to walk up, squeeze it, and drink whatever comes out of it. Basically saying that has to be the world's bravest person. I think this might be in the same general sphere. So who knows? Again, dear listeners, you tell us if this needs to be. It might even have to be off season. It could be next week's episode. But yeah, if this is a thing, if we need to pose this question to the racing community and roll in the answers as part of whatever episode, let us know. We are here to please, hopefully, educate or inform a little bit, but ultimately, we're here to please. And speaking of pleasing, Graham, I must tell you that with the delightful job you do of organizing and categorizing the questions that come in, the one following hydrogen fuel, which you have lovingly dubbed Zach Brown on IMSA, WEC, DPI, etc., has 1, 2, 3, 4 questions and or comments
just the top 4.
that among many others that really I think have struck upon a theme that I need to tell you. I had already planned to bring up this exact thing in tomorrow's recording of the Week in IndyCar with my friend Anders Krohn. This is actually going to be, so now it's going to be featured in both Week in features because it's definitely necessary. And I'll try and merge the questions here from David Barker, John Johnson, Joe Izzo, and so on. They follow along a theme of this, dear listener. Let's start with John Johnson's opening. Are you guys sick of Zach Brown's crap yet? ? The final straw for me is him saying United Autosports won't compete in LMP2 and IMSA, but he has no problem being in the lesser class in WEC. He's ruined McLaren. He killed Van Dorn. His Alonso to IndyCar thing is turning into a giant turd. Oh man, we're here 3 weeks in a row. We've got fecal conversations in the first portion. He said, "I'm so sick of this guy." What else, mate? I mean, there's a lot of things on the same theme of like, good Lord, this guy says he's doing everything and nothing, says everything, but the actual movement, we are doing this thing in this series, and it's more than words. Here's a verifiable thing. It seems like we have struck a vein.
Is it worth me just going through, because I was there. Unlike other people who've written interviews with Zach, I was actually there, and rather oddly, they've used my tape recording, but don't worry about that. I was actually there for the conversation with Zach on a range of subjects. So let's have the Zach 15 minutes, okay? So Zach Brown, if you didn't know, CEO of McLaren, the F1 side and everything apart from their GT racing side and the road cars. So he looks after the if you like, the pure racing side rather than the production-based racing side. Also, a board member of Motorsport Network. He, of course, has got interest in various ways with a number of drivers, not least, of course, Fernando Alonso, and he was certainly behind the move that brought Fernando to Indy last year. He is a co-owner of United Autosports, a US flagged but very much a UK-based organisation, and that organisation has operational partnerships for various reasons with Walkinshaw down in Australia and with Andretti Autosports in the United States. So there are a range of questions that came up, one of which I'm sure you'll be dealing with on the Week in IndyCar to do with Stoffel Van Dorn.
Who I've since been told will be competing in Formula E, is all but assured to be competing in Formula E next year. But,
Formula E.
Yeah, Formula E, but that's... neither here nor there.
But hey ho! But what he did make very clear is there is a million billion miles between what he will actually talk about in terms of United Autosports and what he'll talk about with McLaren, and never the twain shall meet. Other than if there eventually becomes a McLaren prototype offering that is available for customers, then of course United Autosports would be potentially a customer for that. But the key point this weekend was this. Not that long ago that we had a story, perfectly legitimate story, that what was being looked at probably for 2020 was a DPI program for United Autosports. They had made the decision they were not going to go to P2 in 2019 with the class split. Instead of that, they were going to do the Asian Series as a bridging program, and that they would be looking to move their principal program alongside continuing commitment in European Le Mans Series to a DPI program in the USA, and that looked at that stage likely to be a McLaren-powered car. They've made the decision in pretty rapid order for all sorts of reasons. That's now not going to be the direction they take. So first things first, confirm they will continue what's been a very successful LMP3 program, that the LMP2 program, the LMS, will also stay, although there's a slight edge to their LMP2 commitments. I'll come to that in a moment. But they are now looking at an entry into the FIWEC with at least one LMP2 car, likely I think one in year one, from the 2019-2020 season. So effectively, it's a further expansion of United Autosports programs. The other interesting part of that, by the way, before we get on to the McLaren part of it, is that they've made it very clear that they will not race in LMP2 going forward unless they have what they believe is a potential winning package. And that is a direct reference to the difficulties that they've had with maintaining a meaningful attack with the Ligier chassis. They switched at late notice to Michelin this weekend, and will continue to the end of the year with the Michelin chassis. And they won that truncated race with Felipe Albuquerque, and the first ever overall win in a prototype from young Phil Hansen. May well be, was being looked into yesterday, the youngest ever winner of a European Le Mans Series race at 19 years old. But they're making it very clear that they remain open should the Ligier chassis not prove to be competitive moving forward, with or without the Michelin tyres, that they remain open to looking elsewhere. And yeah, lots of rumblings about what may or may not be going on in terms of further changes, whether or not that be BOP, in other words, putting weight in an Orica, or whether or not that be another tweak to the rules or to the regulations about changes to the LMP2 chassis. We'll just have to wait and see what actually comes out from there. If we don't get those changes and we don't get that BOP, I think the reality is you're going to start to see other teams beginning to desert the other rival chassis to Oricas. At the moment, not quite all conquering, but certainly it would appear to be superior performing 07. So that was the United Autosports side of things. So no real shocks, but the surprise there was where the potential had been for a future DPI program that appears now to have gone away. And we can all speculate as to what the reasons were behind that. They say that the business model of ELMS and into the WEC suits them. They do have 3 Ligier chassis available, so that makes perfect sense in that regard. On the McLaren side, it was all about the forthcoming regulations about 2020 LMP1, the so-called hypercar, car, whatever we want to call it, regulations. And again, there's Zach saying, look, we are in the room. We are taking a look at it. Decision would be made end of this year and into early next year as to whether or not that's viable. The problem at this point is we're getting very short of time for anything that's a clean sheet of paper, or nowadays a clean screen, to be developed into a race car. That means that realistically, to get to the point where you're starting in September 2020, which is the first point at which the new rules cars would be expected to run at the moment, you would have to be designing from scratch a car, but before you can get there, making and winning the battle corporately to get the budgets to do it. So realistically, you're looking at manufacturers effectively having to have done most of that groundwork, whether or not that's basic design work and or the commercial work, some little time ago. and that's beginning to rattle a few cages, I think. It is getting quite late to get these cars to the point where they need to be. And the question then arises, are McLaren going to be in the ring? I think it's getting pretty tight for them to do so in year one. That said, the new rule set sort of supports rather better than previous rule sets, because the ability to develop these cars